everyone. I am so excited to finally share another process video with you showing how I create a layout from start to finish. It's been a while since I shared my last process video and there have been lots of requests for more, so I hope you all enjoy this one. For this video, I am working with a sketch from one of my newest sketch bundles, sketches for 6x6 inch paper pads, one-page sketches. It includes 20 one-page sketches that all use 6x6 inch papers on full 12x12 inch layouts. I'm currently creating layouts with all 20 of the sketches in this bundle for another upcoming group that I will be hosting. And I'll announce more about that at a later date. So as I have been working through these sketches and creating the layouts, I immediately noticed how quickly these layouts come together. And I'm not really what I would consider to be a fast scrapbooker, but using 6x6 inch paper pads really makes the whole process of creating a layout so much faster. It's really a nice benefit that comes with using 6x6 papers. I'll add some links down in the video description to the 6x6 sketches that we have at scrapbookgeneration.com, including the one from this video. I highly recommend that if you haven't scrapbooked with 6x6 inch papers, that you give it a try. I think a lot of people are surprised at how much fun they are to work with, how much time they can save you, and that the smaller size of paper isn't as limiting as you might think it would be. Okay, so I think that's enough with the talking. Let's get to the fun part of the video. I hope you enjoy, and don't forget to subscribe. I'm using some photos of my youngest son at the beach paired with the Just Chill 6x8 paper pad from My Mind's Eye. I love this collection so much. It's got so many great colors and fun patterns. I start off pulling out the papers that I think I might want to use. The sketch I'm using has 3 main pattern paper pieces, so I'm looking for 3 papers that coordinate well with my photos. At this point, I was pretty sure of 2 of the papers, but I was struggling with the third. I knew right away that I was going to use the orange because it so perfectly matched a little bit of orange in Jackson's swim trunks. I also knew I wanted to use the stripe. I typically will use a stripe to tie in all the colors of the layout, and I liked that it had the orange in it. I really love that teal paper with the words all over it, and I wanted to use it so bad, but it just didn't quite go well with my photos and the other 2 papers that I wanted to use. I finally settled on the pineapple paper because I like that the blue on the paper coordinates with the blue on the stripe. Since the sketch I'm using is for 6x6 inch papers, I have to cut each sheet down to 6 inches first. The design of the papers on my layout is a grouping of 3 triangles that are placed together to create a square. One of the triangles is half of a 6x6 inch sheet, and the other 2 are a fourth of a 6x6 inch sheet. So I start off cutting each paper into a half triangle. The orange paper is going to be my half piece, and the stripe and pineapple are going to be the smaller triangles. Because I need these separate triangles to fit perfectly together to form a square, I decide to measure and make a pencil mark at the halfway point of the longest edge just to make sure that when I cut the triangle with my paper trimmer, it's the exact correct alignment. My paper trimmer sometimes cuts a little off, so it's just an extra precaution. Now that all the pieces are cut, I can piece them together and hope that they all fit the way they are supposed to. To adhere the first piece, I use my grid ruler to help me get it on there straight. Once that first piece is on there, it's pretty easy to add the other 2 pieces. I added a white cardstock mat to each photo. Right now I have 5 photos, but I'm only going to use 3. These are leftover photos from another layout I had made, and I wasn't sure which 3 I wanted to use. I wanted to lay them out and see which 3 I thought fit best with each other and with the design of the layout. Before I adhere each one down, I run my fingernail along the edges of the mat to kind of rough up the edge a little. Doing that adds just a little bit of texture and lift to the edges and helps them stand out. I like to do this to all of the paper pieces on my layout just to add that little bit of definition to the edges. It's a tiny detail, but I really like the look of it. After my photos are adhered to the layout, I start adding the pencil lines that I will use as a guide to pierce holes for some hand stitching. I'm adding a border around each individual triangle piece, so I use my ruler and pencil to draw a line 1/8 of an inch away from each edge. I know it's different for everyone, but my method for stitching is starting with the pencil line most of the time. This way you can get a preview of what your stitching might look like, and it serves as a guide for piercing your holes. Even if you are using a piercing guide, the pencil line can help you see that you are staying in line as you pierce. Sometimes that guide can shift a little as you pierce. When I have all of the pencil lines drawn on there, I start piercing the holes. I pierce the holes at the meeting points first and then fill in the lines between them. I do this so that the holes at the meeting points are perfectly placed. I typically will pierce my holes somewhere between 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch apart. Now that the holes are pierced, I go back and erase the pencil lines just to make sure there isn't any pencil showing through my stitching. I'm going to use a different color of embroidery floss for each triangle. Starting with the orange square, I selected an orange floss to match. I like to stitch using only 3 strands instead of the full 6. I feel like it's so much easier to stitch with 3. I like to anchor the end of my thread to the back of my layout with a small piece of masking tape. To stitch, I typically use a back stitch. Sometimes I use a running stitch, but I feel like a back stitch looks just a little teeny tiny bit better. I go back and forth between the two depending on my mood. One day it's a back stitch, the next day it's a running stitch. There are pros and cons to using both. It's really just personal preference. And in the end, they both get the job done. After I complete the stitching, I anchor the end of the thread to the back of the layout with another piece of masking tape and then cut off any excess. Then I repeat the same process to stitch on the other 2 triangles. I used a light teal embroidery floss on the pineapple paper and then a pink on the stripe. I want the stitching to be a subtle complement to the paper it is on. Now that I have the stitching done, I start adding in the embellishments. I knew that I wanted to create clusters of water elements with some tropical floral details. I cut the water splashes and droplets with my silhouette, and then I'm using stickers from the coordinating Just Chill sticker book as well. That thing is packed with stickers. For the splash pieces, I have a variety of sizes from large to teeny tiny. I like the idea of having a wide range of sizes for the design I have in mind. Generally, when I'm creating clusters like this, I start with my larger pieces first and figure out that placement before I start adding in the smaller items. I feel like it's easier to start with the bigger pieces because you have less options of where they might work in the design. After I have an idea of where I want the larger pieces, I start adding in some of the medium-sized pieces. For my medium-sized pieces, I added in some leaves and flowers. After those are added, then I start looking for some smaller flowers or details to add here and there and fill in the rest of the design. Sometimes this stage and placement is a lot of trial and error. I'll move things around, maybe add more, take some stuff off, put it back on again, move it somewhere else. I don't adhere anything until I am happy with how it looks. I really wish I could be one of those that just glues it on and moves on, but I tend to be a little bit of a perfectionist about certain things. So I like to be 100% certain that I like the placement and that I feel like it's going to work the way I want it to before I adhere it down. A lot of times, if it's a really detailed cluster and I have the placement figured out, but nothing is adhered yet, I'll snap a picture of it really quickly with my phone so that I can see the placement. And as I start to take things off and adhere everything, I can look back at that picture to see where everything was, just to make sure it ends up the way that I had envisioned it. So now I feel like the clusters are pretty close to what I had in mind, and I'm happy with most of the details. So now I'm going to add some stitching to the 4 larger splash pieces. Because I'm going to adhere them with foam adhesive and not directly onto the layout, I'm going to add my stitching before I adhere them. Anytime I have a larger, simple shape like this, I will 99% of the time add stitching to it. I love the texture and dimension it adds to those pieces. I'm very comfortable in my piercing, so I just freehand this without a pencil line. If you are newer to stitching, it might be helpful to draw a pencil line around the edge where you want your stitching to be. I aim for mine to be about 1/8 of an inch from the edges. That's probably my usual go-to spacing for any kind of stitched border. When I'm ready to start stitching, I follow the same method as before. I use 3 strands of embroidery floss and anchor the end to the back side of the splash. Then I stitch around the whole piece using a back stitch. Then it's lather, rinse, repeat for the remaining pieces. With the stitching finished, now I can start adhering everything down. I use foam adhesive on each of the splash pieces. If I've added stitching to a die cut that isn't already adhered on the layout, then I will always use foam adhesive to adhere it. The stitching creates a lip on the backside, so it's hard to adhere it directly on the layout. If I didn't want to use foam adhesive, I would adhere the splash pieces first, then add my stitching. But I love the dimension that foam adhesive has, so I like to use it on pieces like this, and I use it often. Since I've already kind of pre-planned the placements of everything in these clusters, adhering it all goes a lot quicker. At this point, I'm still a little undecided with some elements. I may add something only to take it off a few minutes later or move things around a little differently than I had originally planned. And that's just the creative process. It's funny how you can love the way something looks and be so sure of something 1 second, and then you add one tiny piece and suddenly it doesn't work at all. Our creative brains go on quite the roller coaster throughout the creative process. For the larger flower stickers, since they overlap onto both the splash pieces, which I used foam adhesive on, and the photos, which are flat on the layout, I have to use half foam adhesive and half regular adhesive so that those stickers are the same height as the splash pieces. Small word and phrase stickers have always been one of my favorite go-to embellishments. I add them to probably every layout I make. I was so happy to find that there were tons in this sticker book, so I had a lot to choose from. I ended up picking 2 different word stickers to add to the top left corner, and then I overlapped them onto each other. One of them I cut a notch out of both ends just for fun. Now I am moving on to my title. I'm going to add the word beach with the letter stickers from the sticker book. I love the different colors and the style of the alphabet stickers. Since the word beach is going to overlap onto the photos, I used foam adhesive to adhere them. I'm also going to use a phrase sticker as part of my title and some small block letters to finish my title. Just like the clusters, when I'm constructing my title, I like to lay it all out first before I commit to adhering it down. I have made the mistake before of adhering as I go and then not liking the outcome. And usually if you stick something down on a photo, it's not coming back up. I've definitely learned my lesson with that. So the main clusters are complete and I have my title added. So I move on to my journaling and a small little cluster that will help highlight it. I almost always use a corner rounder on my journaling blocks. I really don't know why. I think I just like the softer edge for some reason. I adhered the journaling block with foam adhesive because I'm going to have a few splashes and flowers around it and some tucked behind it. Plus, I just like that extra dimension that it gives. For the splash pieces, I'm going to add some stitching on the two larger pieces. One, I'm going to adhere directly to the layout because it's going to be somewhat tucked behind the papers. The second piece will be adhered with foam adhesive, so I will be stitching on it before I add it to the layout. I pierce the holes on the second piece by itself and then pierce the holes on the first piece while it's on the layout because it's going to be stitched directly onto the layout. Then it's the same process as before. 3 strands, anchored to the back, stitching with the back stitch. One is directly on the layout and the other one is not. With the stitching done, I complete the cluster of splashes, flowers, and a little phrase sticker. Now I'm going to add in my final details. First, I'm adding some glitter to the small splash pieces to help them stand out as well. I'm not completely covering them, just adding enough for a little sparkle. Next, I use Nuvo Dream Drops in Cloud 9 to add a small dot to the center of each flower. I like having that dimensional detail on those flower stickers. My last detail is using Nuvo Jewel Drops in Sea Breeze and Nuvo Crystal Drops in Aqua Plains to add a small little dimensional water droplet throughout the design. To create these, you squeeze out a drop and then use a needle to drag the drop out to a point. If you want to see it closer up, be sure to check out my Nuvo Drop layout share video. There's a mini tutorial in it that shows how to create these droplets, along with a few other Nuvo Drop creations. I'll link to it in the video description below, just in case you want to check it out. To complete the layout, I decided to add a background piece, so I'm going to trim down the layout to 11.5 by 11.5 and center it on a 12 by 12 inch piece of craft cardstock. This wasn't originally planned, but I got a little annoyed at some of my placement margins around the outer edge. I like having consistent margins, so trimming this paper down and putting it on a background piece allowed me to correct that. And I ended up really liking the background piece, so it all ended well. And that's the completed layout from start to finish. It was a lot of fun to create because it had so many of my favorite things, like using a sketch, using beach photos, creating splash designs, Nuvo drops, and of course, lots of hand stitching. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to go grab these 6x6 sketches and give them a try sometime. See you next time.